Have you ever wondered what happens when a rainstorm doesn't just soak your clothes, but reshapes your entire life? Could a single act of kindness in the dead of night pull a desperate father back from the edge of collapse? And when a wealthy stranger steps into your world, would you call it fate or just a twist of luck? Step with me into this story, a journey of tears, hope, and unexpected turns, to find out. Before we dive in, if you love stories that tug at your heartstrings and make you think, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Your support keeps these tales coming. Now, let's get started. The rain wouldn't stop. It slammed into Chicago's south side with a fury that felt like it had my name on it, splintering the cracked pavement and flooding the streets with a dark, glassy tide. As a black man who'd spent my life dodging the city's sharper edges, I felt that storm in my soul, cold, relentless, personal. My jacket, a denim relic stitched together with duct tape and desperation, hung heavy with water, no match for the chill that clawed into my bones. The wind howled through the neighborhood, rattling chain-link fences and moaning past the husks of abandoned storefronts, a chorus of loss I couldn't outrun. Beside me, Mia skipped along in her scuffed pink rain boots, splashing in puddles with a glee that defied the storm's wrath. Her laughter cut through the gray like a blade of sunlight, fragile but fierce. At 7, she was my anchor, the one thing keeping me from sinking into the abyss that had swallowed everything else. Her dark curls spilled from her hood, plastered to her cheeks, and her eyes, wide, trusting, still saw wonder where I saw only wreckage. She didn't know how bad it had gotten. She didn't know that tonight we had no home. That by morning, the last thread of our old life, an apartment I couldn't pay for, a landlord's eviction notice taped to the door like a badge of shame, would snap. The car, a '98 Honda with a cracked windshield and a rattling engine, was our final stronghold. I'd parked it in an alley 2 blocks away, its back seat a makeshift nest of our dwindling world. A duffel bag of clothes, Mia's stuffed bunny with one ear missing, and a dented can of soup from a church pantry that smelled faintly of mildew. I shifted the strap of the bag on my shoulder, the only one I hadn't pawned, and pressed forward through the downpour. The diner loomed ahead, its neon sign buzzing faintly through the rain. I had a shift washing dishes, 4 hours of scouring grease for $8 an hour. It wasn't much, but it was a lifeline. In a storm this brutal, even a frayed rope felt like salvation. "Daddy, look." Mia's voice yanked me from the fog of my thoughts. I followed her gaze across the street. A silver Mercedes sat askew on the curb, its hazard lights blinking like a distress signal in the dark. Beside it, a white woman wrestled with an umbrella that kept flipping inside out, her blonde hair lashing her face in the wind. She was shouting into her phone, her voice sharp with exasperation, a figure out of place in this crumbling corner of the city. She was stranded. I stopped cold. I knew that car. That kind of person. Sleek, expensive, a stranger to the South Side's grit and grind. Her Chicago was glass towers and rooftop bars. Mine was late notices, flickering streetlights, and the echo of gunshots 2 blocks over. People like her didn't see black folks like me, not unless they had no choice. And even then, it was rarely with kindness. But Mia tugged my sleeve, her voice soft as a hymn. "Maybe we can help?" God, it was the way she looked at me, eyes brimming with faith, like I was still the man who could fix the world, like goodness could still win if we just tried. I'd spent years shielding that light, ever since her mom walked out 5 years ago, leaving me, a black single dad, to cobble our lives together with odd jobs and empty promises. I couldn't let her see it flicker out. Not now, not ever. I sighed, the sound lost in the storm's roar. "All right, kiddo, let's go." We crossed the street, water soaking through my sneakers, turning my socks into a cold, squelching mess. As we approached, the woman turned, her sharp blue eyes locking onto mine. She was rich, tailored coat dripping rain, leather boots gleaming despite the mud, a posture that screamed confidence even in chaos. Her hand tightened on her phone as she sized me up, a black man in a soaked jacket, frayed jeans, approaching her car in the dark. I knew that look. Suspicion. A quick calculus of risk. It wasn't new. It was as old as the city's red-line maps, as familiar as the sideways glances I'd gotten since I was a kid running these streets. It stung, a quiet bruise I'd carried my whole life, but I'd learned to swallow it. I raised a hand, keeping my voice steady. Flat tire. She hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. Yeah, roadside assistance is useless in this mess. I can change it, I said, nodding toward the wheel. Her gaze lingered, on my calloused hands, my patched clothes, the exhaustion etched into my face like a roadmap of defeat. She didn't trust me, not fully, but the rain left her no options. Mia stepped forward, holding our battered umbrella over me as I knelt by the car. My daddy's the best at fixing things, she said, her voice bright with pride. He says kindness doesn't cost nothing, so we should give it away. I kept my head down, hands moving on autopilot. The rain numbed my fingers, but I'd changed tires and worse. Back when I was lead mechanic at Wexler Auto, before the plant shuttered 3 years ago and my life unraveled like a cheap thread. Lug nuts loosened, the spare slid into place. 15 minutes later, the car was road ready. The woman exhaled, relief softening her sharp edges. She reached into her purse and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. Here, for your trouble. I shook my head. No need. Just glad to help. She blinked, surprise flickering across her face. Her eyes traced me again, this time, seeing past the soaked denim, the weariness. A black man struggling, turning down money in a storm. After a beat, she tucked the bill away. Let me give you a ride. You're drenched. Pride flared hot in my chest. I didn't need her charity, not from someone who'd probably never walked a block in my shoes. But Mia's hand slipped into mine, her fingers cold and trembling, a silent plea for warmth that cut through my resolve. All right, I said, voice tight. Thanks. We climbed into the Mercedes. The heated leather seats enveloped us, a luxury so foreign it felt like a dream. Mia nestled beside me, her boots dripping muddy water onto the pristine floor mats, a small rebellion against the car's perfection. The woman glanced at me in the rearview mirror. I'm Isabel Carter. I froze. That name. It was everywhere. Billboards, business magazines, TV ads. Isabel Carter, CEO of Carter Automotive, self-driving cars, tech empires, a fortune forged in innovation. She wasn't just rich. She was a titan. James Holloway, I said, keeping my tone flat. Mia, unfazed, chattered on. We help people all the time, even when it's hard. Daddy says it's how we make the world better. Isabel listened, her expression unreadable behind those sharp eyes. When we reached the diner, she pulled out a notepad from her glove box. Give me your number. I hesitated. People like her didn't call black folks like me, not for anything real. But I scribbled it down, the pencil shaking slightly in my hand, leaving a jagged scrawl on the page. She drove off, her taillights swallowed by the rain, leaving us standing under the diner's flickering awning. 2 weeks later, the bottom fell out. The eviction hit like a sledgehammer. The diner cut my shifts, too many hands, not enough plates, and the landlord locked us out overnight. I'd begged, offered half payments, even showed him Mia's drawing of our home to soften him. He didn't flinch, didn't care about a black man's pleas. We were left with the Honda, parked in a crumbling lot behind a shuttered gas station, its tarp-covered windshield flapping in the wind. The cold seeped in, relentless, turning every night into a battle. We slept in the car, Mia curled in the back with her bunny, me awake in the front, watching the shadows for trouble, drug runners, cops, anyone who might see a black father and daughter as easy targets. I'd scrounge day-old rolls from the diner, spin tales of superheroes flying through storms to keep her smiling. But inside, I was breaking. I'd failed her, my little girl, who deserved a roof, not a rusted roof rack. Then, a flicker of grace. Mrs. Ellis, a gray-haired black widow who'd become a diner regular, caught me slipping Mia a stale muffin one night after my shift. Her eyes softened, crinkling at the corners. You're not alone, James. Bring her to me tomorrow. She lived in a sagging two-flat a mile away, its porch creaking under decades of wear. Her kitchen smelled of garlic and nostalgia, a warm haven where she fed Mia spaghetti and let her watch cartoons on an ancient TV with rabbit ears. She'd lost her own kids to time, one to college, one to the streets, and saw something in us worth saving. You're a good man, she'd say, her voice firm. Don't let this world tell you different. It was a kindness I couldn't repay, but it bought me time to breathe. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. James Holloway? Her voice, cool, deliberate, cut through the static. Yeah. Who's this? Isabel Carter. Do you have a moment? Suspicion coiled tight in my gut. What do you want? I looked into you, she said. Your work at Wexler Auto. You were one of the best before it went under. Anger surged, hot and sharp. If this is some white lady pity, it's not. Her tone sliced through mine. I need a lead mechanic. You've got the skills. I've got the job. I stopped breathing. A real job. Benefits. A chance to climb out of the hole. Why me? I asked, voice low, almost a growl. A pause stretched across the line. You remind me of my dad. He'd been a mechanic too, she said. A white man who'd worked himself to the bone in a Detroit garage, chasing a dream that never materialized. Cancer stole him before his break came, leaving her with a legacy of grit and regret. She couldn't rewrite his story, but she could change mine. What's the catch? 30-day probation. Prove yourself. I glanced at Mia, asleep on Mrs. Ellis's couch, her bunny clutched tight against her chest. When do I start? Carter Automotive's headquarters rose like a cathedral of glass and steel, its garage alive with the hum of prototypes, sleek machines that promised a future I'd never dared imagine for a black man like me. I walked in wearing my cleanest shirt, still frayed at the cuffs, Mia's hand in mine. She'd begged to see the fancy cars, her eyes sparkling with awe as we stepped into the cavernous space. The shop was a universe apart from Wexler's oil-stained chaos. Engineers, mostly white, in crisp polos, tinkered with electric engines, their jargon a tangle of tech speak I barely grasped. I felt like a ghost, a 38-year-old black ex-con with a GED and a juvie record from boosting cars at 19 to feed my family after Dad's heart attack took him too soon. That mistake had branded me, a shadow I'd carried through every job, every rejection, every "we'll call you." That never came. Ruiz, the foreman, a stocky Latino man with a buzz cut and a no-nonsense stare, sized me up. Carter says you're good. Don't make her a liar. They handed me a busted prototype. Suspension collapsed, diagnostics fried. I dove in, hands steady from years of muscle memory. By noon, I'd fixed it and flagged a design flaw in the chassis that could have cost millions down the line. Ruiz raised an eyebrow, a grunt of approval escaping his throat. Not bad, Holloway. But not everyone was impressed. Brett, a slick white engineer with a Harvard sneer and a chip on his shoulder, leaned in later that day. Carter's pet project, huh? Don't get too comfortable. This isn't your world. I ignored him. Mia's face, her trust, her hope, kept me grounded. I'd heard worse from men like him my whole life. 3 weeks in, I'd found my rhythm. I worked late, mastering Carter's systems, earning nods from Ruiz, and even a rare, good work from the crew. Mia stayed with Mrs. Ellis, who'd taken to braiding her hair and teaching her to knead cornbread dough, filling the gaps I couldn't. You're building something, James, Mrs. Ellis said one night, sliding me a $20 bill for gas. Don't let nobody take that from you. Then Brett struck. A critical component, a custom actuator, vanished from my station hours before a deadline. I caught his smirk as I tore through the shop, panic clawing my chest. Failure meant losing the job, the apartment, the fragile future I'd started to believe in as a black man who'd never been given a real shot. Rage burned hot, memories of juvie fights flashing in my mind, but I swallowed it. For Mia, I jury-rigged a fix with spare parts, my hands shaking as the clock ticked down. I met the deadline, sweat beading on my forehead. Ruiz found the actuator in Brett's locker the next day, his fingerprints smeared across it. By morning, Brett was gone, escorted out by security. Isabel didn't tolerate sabotage. She'd built her empire on trust, not games, and I respected that, even if I didn't trust her motives yet. Mrs. Ellis became our cornerstone. She'd sit Mia at her scarred kitchen table, sharing stories of her son who'd died in a gang fight and her daughter who'd made it to nursing school. Life's a storm, James, she'd say, her voice weathered but warm. You just keep rowing. One night, she handed me a tin of homemade cornbread. For strength, she said. I took it, throat tight, vowing to repay her when I could stand on my own. Day 29, Isabel summoned me to her office. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city, rain streaking the glass like a baptism. She stood behind her desk, her tailored suit a stark contrast to my faded flannel. You're in, she said, voice firm. Full-time. Benefits. There's an apartment upstairs, employee housing. It's yours if you want it. I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. Why me? You earned it. she said, her gaze steady. And because Mia deserves it. I saw my dad in you that night. Tired, proud, unbreakable. I couldn't save him, but I can give you this. That night, I carried Mia into a small, warm apartment, a real bed, a kitchen with a stove that worked, a window overlooking the city's jagged skyline. She hugged her bunny, her voice a whisper. Is this ours, Daddy? Yeah, kiddo, I said, my voice breaking. It's ours. The rain still falls in Chicago, but it's softer now, a murmur instead of a roar. I'm not just surviving. I'm rising. Mia's in school, her laughter spilling through our home like a river breaking free. Isabel's tough, but she's given me a drafting table, a chance to design the next prototype, to leave my mark as a black man who beat the odds. Mrs. Ellis visits every Sunday, her cornbread a ritual of gratitude. Kindness cost me everything, pride, fear, a soaked jacket. It stripped me bare and built me back stronger. For Mia, for Mrs. Ellis, for the black man I used to be, I'd walk through 1,000 storms. And I'd do it again. Lesson learned from the story. The biggest lesson from this story is that kindness, no matter how small, can create ripples that change lives. James Holloway teaches us that even in our darkest moments, when the world feels cold and unforgiving, reaching out to help someone else can open doors we never imagined. It's a reminder that resilience isn't just about surviving. It's about holding on to hope and humanity, even when the odds are stacked against us. For me, it's proof that one good deed can be the spark that lights up a whole new future. Meaningful message conveyed. This story carries a powerful message. Second chances are real, and they often come from the most unexpected places. It's about redemption, not just for James, but for Isabel too, who finds a way to honor her father's memory through someone else's struggle. It tells us that no matter where we start, rich or poor, black or white, broken or whole, our choices to lift each other up can bridge the gaps between us. It's a call to look beyond appearances, to see the potential in people, and to believe that even in a storm, there's a way forward together. Personal perspective on the story. From my point of view, this story hits home because it's raw and real. James isn't a superhero. He's a black man fighting for his daughter, carrying the weight of his past mistakes and a society that doesn't always give him a fair shot. What gets me is how Mia's innocence and his quiet strength turn a random rainy night into a turning point. I love how it shows that life doesn't hand out easy wins, but it does offer moments of grace if we're brave enough to seize them. It's the kind of tale that makes you root for the underdog and believe in the power of grit and goodness. If this story moved you, or if you just want more tales that dig deep into the heart of what makes us human, come follow and subscribe to Story Precious on YouTube. We're all about bringing you the latest videos that inspire, uplift, and keep you thinking long after they're over. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Join our community at Story Precious, because every tale is a treasure waiting to be told.